All right, welcome back. We are ready to go for our last segment for today. This is day 2 of Container Days, and I'm excited for cdk8s. We've had a lot of updates with cdk8s over time. I think the last time we had it on the show was the last Container Day,
Yeah.
which would have been
Yeah.
Kubecon NA. So I'm sure there's plenty of things to talk about. And today we got Pavan, Eli. Pavan, go ahead and introduce yourself and say hello.
Hey everyone, thanks Justin. Welcome Eli. I'm Pavan Mistry. I'm a senior developer advocate with AWS Container Services. And we'll be talking about cdk8s. Really excited about the demo we have, so we'll jump into it right away. Eli, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, folks. My name is Ellie, actually.
Ellie, I'm sorry. That was me.
Sorry.
That's cool. Yeah, I know it's spelled the same. I'm a software development engineer on the CDK group, working both on the AWS CDK, but mainly on the CDK8s for the last couple of years.
Great. And let's dive right in. Pavan, I see you have some slides. Do we want to start there?
Sure, yes. Yeah, so we can share the slides.
Yep, pull those
in. Yeah, great. So this is the agenda. We are going to go through introduction quickly and then jump into cdk8s and cdk8s Plus overview. I know we have a broad range of viewers, so welcome to everyone who is joining us. We'll set context around cdk8s and cdk8s Plus. And then, as I mentioned, we have a great, interesting, when Ellie showed me this demo, I was blown away. I mean, the kind of features and the capabilities, more around one of the struggles we understand with Kubernetes is the version upgrades and the changes and keeping abreast of the updates. So I'm excited about the demo that Ellie has prepared and is going to show us. And then cdk8s updates, so what's next? And we'll open up for Q&A. But to set a context and a brief introduction around what cdk8s is, we announced cdk8s and launched it in May 2020. And then right after that, we had cdk8s Plus, which is a very exciting way of managing YAML and generating YAML for Kubernetes. More importantly, this is a Kubernetes project. It's an open source project, and I did a tech talk around CDK and cdk8s Plus in October 2020, which is on YouTube. Following that, we had Ellie doing an excellent talk at reInvent, which was published around February 2021. So this was February 2021 reInvent. We also announced after that CNCF has accepted cdk8s as a sandbox project. So it's now a fully accepted sandbox project, and it has its own repository with GitHub. We moved from AWS Labs GitHub organization, and now it has dedicated repositories with people, open source developers contributing to it. So we are excited about the updates. So that's a brief overview around cdk8s and cdk8s Plus.
I just want to mention one thing. Kind of the inception of cdk8s, as you mentioned, was about 2 years ago, and it was a joint collaboration inside Amazon, inside AWS, between Nate Tabor, who I guess some of you know, principal PM from EKS, and Elad Ben Israel, who used to be the principal SDE for the CDK team. And basically, they had the same idea at the same time. They both came up with it independently, and then, as luck would have it, they met up one night in New York and kind of shared brain dumps, and that's how it was born. And the idea was that to bring what we did with the AWS CDK and to bring true kind of infrastructure definitions with programming languages, to bring that to the Kubernetes world. So that's the idea.
Awesome, thanks, Ellie. I think that brings us nicely to our next slide in terms of just setting up the context on what cdk8s does. It's an open source software development framework for modeling Kubernetes applications, and it's not coupled or tied to Amazon EKS. So works with Kubernetes manifest that can be deployed to any cluster. It generates the manifest, and for developers who are comfortable working with languages like Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, Golang, and Java, they would feel really comfortable working with this framework where you don't no longer have to worry about Kubernetes objects and writing those YAML files, which can be at times time consuming, but also it doesn't scale really well if you're working with multiple YAML files. So I think in terms of usability and developer experience, this is a really great layer in terms of getting developers working with a language they're comfortable with, and usually, I mean, we have seen the transition around how we have evolved from an infrastructure provisioning in terms of moving from cloud formation, looking at higher level constructs in languages like Terraform, and then moving to generators that generate JSON or YAML documents, and then tools such as AWS CDK and Pulumi, which provide framework to create custom abstractions. So this is our effort in terms of making that lifecycle easy for all Kubernetes clusters. And customers can use it across different managed providers. So, and we are excited that a lot of our customers are using this for production environment. CDK8's been used for production environments as well. Ellie, do you have anything to add?
I just one note is that we'll see in the demo as well, just the fact that we're now moved from kind of a static YAML-based configuration to a general purpose programming language. It just opens the door, just that transition. I'm not even talking about specific CDK8s features, but just the transition to programming languages opens the door for so many features. For example, package managers, right? Reusable packages that you can publish to the standard package managers. Obviously, iterations, loops, if conditions, variables, all that stuff that we normally use in our application code. We know that it's also very useful for infrastructure definitions.
Cool, thanks, Ali. So moving on to setting some context, and we'll be talking about constructs. So this is a good slide I'm quickly going to go through. This, I mean, it's really important to understand construct levels. Using programming languages allows us to employ common software engineering practices like API layering. So CDK8's API consists of various levels. The first level, the level 0, is generic Kubernetes API object. And next level, level 1, represents concrete API objects, and it's completely auto-generated based on open specifications of the Kubernetes API. And the level 2 APIs are some concrete objects, but they are defined by us to provide simpler experience and perform implicit sort of mechanical operations.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. The L0s basically bring you into the world of code. The L1s also provide type safety because they are APIs that are based on a schema. And the L2s actually are kind of high-level API abstractions that are meant to simplify your interaction with those resources and reduce the cognitive load associated with defining them.
Awesome. So let's dive into it, as in look at what CDK8s is in a nutshell. So here's what CDK8s does in terms of when you install CDK8s, and the installation process is pretty straightforward. If you worked with NPM or any other package management tool for Mac systems, we have brew install. So that's as simple as running that command. Once you have installed it, you would initialize the application using CDK8's init, and then if you work with CDK, it's pretty simple, but CDK8's init, and then you run a couple of commands, and CDK8's synth would generate your YAML for Kubernetes.
Yeah, objects. So you can see on the left is basically what it takes to define a Kubernetes deployment using the L1 layer. So the L1 layer is concrete API objects, right? And they provide type safety, they provide schema, but they don't really change the way you define the object. You still need to define every single property, and the structure is exactly the same as the YAML structure. So you can see the transformation between the code and the YAML is not that different, right? You have to write pretty much the same amount of code. Obviously, with cdk8s, you have the advantage of using a code and defining variables, but as kind of from a cognitive load perspective, you still need to be aware, and you still need to know all of the properties and all of the same things you would as you'd write your YAML file.
I like to describe L1 as YAML with curly braces and commas.
Yeah, well,
it's essentially the same thing.
And type safety.
Right, there are some benefits, but as far as like the writer's concerned, like it's like, okay, yeah, you still have to define every aspect of that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So next is the interesting part, cdk8s plus, and here's where you see the difference. So look at this size of the code in cdk8s plus and what it generates. Ellie, would you like to take it away in terms of what it generates?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the holy grail. You can see on the left, this is the code snippet that you would use with cdk8s plus to define a deployment that simply deploys an Nginx container. We like to call the L2 layers intent-based APIs, right? So they still the wording and all the objects are still the same. It's still a deployment, but the API is designed in a way that it's supposed to capture your intent. So if your intent is simply to deploy an Nginx container, that's all you should be defining. You shouldn't have to define selectors and labels and metadata and all that stuff. Our APIs basically implement all that kind of mechanical boilerplate implementation for you. So on the left is a one-liner that defines a deployment with a container. On the right is the manifest that it creates. And you can see it's a little small, but trust me, it's there. So all of the label selectors and the metadata requirements are automatically generated in a unique and stable way. You can also see that cdk8s plus surfaces a lot of the Kubernetes defaults for you. For example, a deployment has a default upgrade strategy of a rolling update with a max surge of 25%, right? So all of that stuff is surfaced in the manifest, and you don't have to go into the Kubernetes documentation to understand how those properties are behaving.
Great. So in the interest of time, and I want to do enough justice to the demo, so we're going to quickly skip the next slide. But if you have any questions around how cdk8s works, then feel free to ping us, contact us on contact details we're providing at the end of the session, or on Twitter, and we'll be glad to help you. But let's jump into the demo quickly, Ellie, and see what you have for us.
Yeah.
You want to make that font a bit bigger too.
Yeah. Let's try. Is that better?
One more, maybe.
One more.
I can read some of that now. Perfect.
Okay, so this is my Visual Studio Code. I've already initialized a cdk8s application just for the sake of time. I ran cdk8s in it, just like Pavan said. And what I want to do now is so I'm using TypeScript here. And what I want to do now is I want to define a very simple Kubernetes application with the L1 layer. And the application basically consists of a deployment, a service, and an ingress. So, and the idea is to create a deployment and expose it using the ingress resource. And the way you do it in Kubernetes is, so you create a deployment, right? And we've seen this already, all of this definitions that you need to provide. Then you create a service that needs to select that deployment with using labels. And then you need to create an ingress that also selects, basically references the service that we just created. So even here, you can see the benefits of using code. Because, for example, I don't have to repeat the service name twice. I actually even don't have to give my service a concrete name, because cdk8s does that for you. And I can just reference the service name using normal code practices. So specifically, this demo, like Pavan mentioned, is focused around how cdk8s can help you with Kubernetes version upgrades. So setting the stage right now is I'm a Kubernetes operator, or I'm a developer, and I'm interacting with Kubernetes version 121. Okay, so we can see that in the cdk8s configuration here, I am importing the Kubernetes 121 specification. And if we look at the imports file here, this is like a massive TypeScript file that contains all of the Kubernetes resources as they are defined in the schema for Kubernetes 121.0. And specifically, since I've been using this for a while, I am using the Kubernetes Ingress resource in its v1 beta 1 version. Right, that was the resource that existed before it became stable. So this is fine. Let's run the synth command now, and let's see what it generates. Okay, so you can see in the dist folder here, this is our manifest. No big surprises here. This is like we talked about. This is pretty much a mapping of what we saw in code, because we're using the L1s. One important thing to note here is obviously this API version is v1 beta 1, because we're using the v1 beta 1 resource. And also take a note for this kind of structure here. Okay, so now I have this application, and it's deployed successfully into 121 version. And now I'm upgrading to Kubernetes 122. Now, for those of you who don't know, in Kubernetes 122, there was a bunch of removals. Basically, a lot of deprecated resources that were just removed. One of them is the Ingress resource. Okay, so basically, the Ingress v1 beta 1 resource was removed in favor of the new Ingress resource, which is now a stable resource, and it has a different API group. So if I try to deploy this manifest on the new version of Kubernetes, it's going to fail at runtime, and I'm going to need to decipher those errors. Let's see how cdk8s can help with that. So what I want to do right now is basically, because I'm operating against a new version, I'm going to change this to 122. I'm going to rerun the import command. Okay, and now you can see that I actually have a compilation error immediately, right? So the compilation error says, well, this resource doesn't exist anymore in the type definitions. So now I can say, well, now I don't have to wait for the deployment to happen to actually know that my manifest is not going to work. So to fix this, I'm going to look at what does exist. And what does exist is a Kubernetes Ingress resource, just without the beta suffix. So I'm going to use that one. And now I also see that actually the structure of the resource has changed. And so not only did they remove, or not only did they graduate the resource, but they also made a breaking change in the structure. So now I have to change how this thing actually works. So let's see. Yeah.
So Ellie, I mean, if we were not to change these lines, would we get an error when we are compiling it?
Yeah, you would not be able to compile it.
Okay.
So let's see how this new structure now looks like. So we can see that instead of this service name and service port, we need to define a service that defines a name, right? So we're going to do this, and a port, and basically like this. And this is also not right, because it's actually a little bit more complex. Number, port. Okay, so that's it, right? That's it was pretty kind of straightforward. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just following the compiler and making it happy. So if I run synth again, oh, this is import. Sorry. If I run synth again. So now it works. And if we look at the manifest now, obviously, we get this new API version, and we get the correct structure for the resource. And this manifest can be deployed to the new Kubernetes version, no problem. So
Awesome.
this is when using. I'm going to go a little bit faster because we
got a few minutes left.
Yeah. So what I want to show next is basically the same thing, but using cdk8s+. So let me just go ahead and delete all of this and show you how to do the same thing with cdk8s+. So what I'm going to do is import from cdk8s+ into one. I'm going to create a deployment. I give it a container, image, there it is. And then with cdk8s+, you have APIs that are designed to capture the intent that we tried before, right? If you want to expose your deployment as an ingress, just call the expose via ingress API, give it a path, and I also need to define a port here. That's it. So now let's synthesize this manifest. Cool. And this is for CDK. This is for version 121, right? If we want to jump to version 122, all we need to do is go to our package.json file, upgrade this library, and say, please give me 122. And then we're going to install. Oops. npm install. So now, if I go to this file, I get a compilation error, but the compilation error now is just because I switched libraries, right? So I need to change this to 22. And that's it. I don't have any more errors, right? So if I look at the manifest right now, you can see that it's using this v1 beta 1 version, because in 121, we used the v1 beta 1 version. But now we switched to cdk8s+ 22, and we don't have to do any code changes whatsoever, except for this import. And if we synth again, then we automatically get this new working version of the ingress resource, right? We get the v1, which is the stable, and we get the new structure, and it's all just seamlessly upgraded.
So that was just one line of code change, and cdk8s+ managed everything for the developers. Yeah, awesome.
Cool. So let me just, I have one slide I want to talk about, and then we can open up for questions. Justin, is that cool?
Yeah.
Cool. So let's go to the slide.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So just some updates. Oh, you know what? Let me, for a second. Oop. Present. You can see my screen?
It went. I see the notes. I don't see the presenter's view.
Oh.
You can leave it in the other view. Sometimes.
Okay, let's just leave it like this. So basically, a few updates. So last time cdk8s was on this show, we announced cdk8s going 1.0, but we had a disclaimer about cdk8s+. cdk8s+ was still in beta because we wanted to enhance its APIs and give it some more bake time. So now is the time to announce that we're still not in 1.0, but we're really gearing up towards 1.0. We've added a lot of features. This is just a partial list of the issues and the pull requests that were closed in the last few months. We've added role-based access control, persistent volume claims, affinity, network policies, all that stuff to actually build a production-grade application with cdk8s+. And one other small update is around cdk8s core, the core library. We actually released a version 2.0 of the library, kind of in stealth mode, because there were not a lot of changes. There weren't any actually changes between cdk8s 1.0 and 2.0. The only change was around compatibility with other CDK frameworks. So for example, if you wanna use the cdk8s framework with the AWS CDK v2, you would have to use cdk8s 2.0. If you want to use it with Pulumi, you'd have to use 2.0. So it's just a matter of rearranging the dependencies of the project so that it can interact with other CDK frameworks. We're going to maintain both 2.0 and 1.0 for a while, so don't worry about it. So you have your choice. If you're interacting with AWS CDK v1 or with Terraform earlier versions or with Pulumi earlier versions, then use the 1.0. If you need the newer ones, then use the 2.0 and you should be fine.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I left a couple of comments here in the chat for going to the GitHub repo if you want to get involved. If you have things you're looking for features, go ahead and send them over there, because we always love getting that feedback, and especially as we plan new versions, making sure that we're meeting your needs.
Yep.
This does conclude day 2 of Container Days for us. And so we will be back tomorrow at the same time. Chris and Sai are going to be talking all about EKS Anywhere in the morning and a few other things. If you want to stick around, we have more Container Day content for DockerCon. So there's an entire Container Day plan for the next, I think it's 3 hours, which is focused around DockerCon, which is happening right now. So stick around on Twitch. Jeremiah is going to be coming hosting that show, and we have a whole bunch of other content around what's happening with AWS Container Services and DockerCon. And so lots of cool stuff going on there. I am going to be out for the rest of Container Days because I am jumping on a plane. And if you are in Valencia for Kubecon, come say hi. Come get your sticker with a piece of wood on it, and hope to see you all soon. So have a great day and talk to you later.
All right.